Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to show you and talk to you about watercolour pencils. Now I often get asked, what would you recommend? What pencils would you recommend? And to be honest, for a child or a beginner or a professional artist, anyone, I often recommend watercolour pencils. Why? Because they can be used the same way as a pencil. You can make the same marks, use it as a pencil, but it's got the added benefit of being able to use water to make even more texture and move them across the page. So it's just that added benefit and that fun, the texture you can create. So watercolour pencils, the ones I'm using today are Lyra because I find they've got some really nice strong pigments and colours. First thing I did was I checked out all the colours I had in this set, just using a piece of practice paper, and I've just seen how they have gone onto the paper, so I can see the textures that they make on their own, but then I've seen how they work by adding water. And you'll see some are much stronger than others, some leave the texture behind. It's all this is helping me make decisions. I'm learning from it. So it seems like, you know, why should I need to spend this time? But actually I now know which colours would work in which painting. I can choose them quite quickly, and I know what paper it works on. So I did that on practice paper. This time I tried on a hot press paper. I wanted to see how they worked. I love the way that they went on. They went on quite smoothly because there's no graying as such as there was on the practice paper. But I didn't like the way the length they took to dry, because the hot press paper tends to hold the water on the surface for a little bit longer due to its characteristics. So I tried it on hot press. For me, that wasn't the look I was going for. So I tried it on lots of different papers. This is the Hammermüller Anniversary. It's quite a textured paper. And you can see here, it moves quite well. The pigments move really well on it, some better than others. But for me, it was too textured. So that wasn't what I was going to use on this occasion. So try it on cartridge paper. I think it works. It goes on really smoothly, really nicely. But I don't know if you can see that adding the wetness starts to cockle it, because it's not designed to take wetness. It's designed for sketching. But if I'm out in the field and that's all I've got, it will work fine. Bristol board. Now this is a lovely smooth paper, often used for graphite and very fine drawings. So it went on really nicely and smooth, but it didn't move as well. It's, again, not designed for water, not designed for a watercolour wash. So, you know, that's helping me decide on, I mean, these are all just pieces of paper I have knocking around. Again, this is a Bockingford. I think it looks like a rough texture, so I wanted to see how much texture I wanted or didn't want, and again, how much movement of the pigment I could find. So, you know, when you have little off-cuts, keep them, label them so you know what paper they are, and they're always useful for doing swatches, for testing your colours, rather than having to use a full piece of paper. So that's what I did. In the end, I decided that I liked the texture and the qualities of the practice paper. I liked it, it kept some of the pencil feel, but I was able to move the pigment really well. For me, using watercolour pencils is about keeping the texture of the pencil, showing it was used a pencil, not because I could just do it in watercolour. Therefore, it would look like a watercolour. But it's watercolour pencil, so I quite like to keep the texture. So to celebrate spring starting, you may not see it if you're looking out the window now, but it is on its way and the daffodils are starting to come out. I'm going to do some daffodils, and I'm also going to try a few different techniques. So, picking up a colour, all I'm going to do is just apply it. Now I know I'm putting pigment on the page. It's slightly different to coloured pencils because I know I'm going to be moving it. You can see how easy that is. So a lot of this will just look like colouring in. The skilled bit, the next bit, is being able to look for the tones and the definition and the way that you move it once it's been applied. So this is a lot more orange in here. Again, you'll see I'm not really worrying very much about covering the whole area in pigment, because I want to leave some of the paper white. What I am doing is I'm trying to follow the grain of the leaf, so just putting on. I don't want, the difference with watercolours, you can control where the pigment is. With this pigment on, you're not sure how far it's going to flow. So again, add some, I've got quite a lot of lines. I've kind of lost where I'm going with them, but it doesn't matter. I'm sure it will work out. It's got some yellow there. This, I don't want to be as detailed. Okay, so that's, because I've done those swatches beforehand, I'm quite happy. I know that is the colour I want. Let's try and add some more tones. Different to watercolour, the colours need to be mixed on the page. It's not something you can do on a palette. You can, and I will show you that later, but for me at the moment I'm just mixing these pigments on the paper, and then I'll allow the water to mix them for me. So you can see it's just a new tone on here, so there's a lot more orange into the leaves of these daffodils. Okay, one, and actually I quite like the pencil feel as it is. Quite like the, I'm actually missing a leaf there, so I'll put it in. The feel, I work quite quickly. I could slow down, but for me, I just like to get the texture on, the colour on. I've just put one more colour on. This might be too orange, so I'm going to mix it. I know this ochre works quite nicely, but I want it to be a little bit more orange. What I do find, it is a little bit difficult to get some really good dark tones in, but we'll have a good go, because what you can do is, once you've wet it and let it dry, you can go back in with pencil. Like I said, I like to see and feel the texture of pencil. These I may have a little, I'm putting a little bit in back to here. So what I'm actually just doing is I'm putting pigment down onto the surface. So, all right, again, with those swatches I did, I was also discovering which brush I like to work with. Do I need a big soft brush, or in this case I'm using a synthetic brush because it was a lot stiffer. It was able to move, depending on the paper, it was able to move the pigment around. So those first stages of doing swatches have so many benefits. So I'm just going to move, look how that changes colour, because with those swatches I know how the colour can change. I'm just moving from the base, because the leaves are quite smooth, but they also have this texture and shape in them. That's a nice colour. Still keeping some of that pencil marks behind, which I think is nice. But you work however you find your own way of working. These are just tips which I enjoy working in. So, okay, you can see how that's really softening the pigment. Too much water, and it's moving really well. What I'm trying to do is create tones, not overly efficiently at the moment, so maybe I need to. At the moment it's quite flat, so what I'm going to do is, while I've got pigment, there you go, that's better, it's lighter at the top. While I've still got some pigment on, I'm just going to have a look and bring out some more colours behind. I've lost that. So I already had pigment on my... Again, I'm not doing that middle. I just want to bring out... You can continue to work. This isn't the last stage. This is the first stages. I can build up. I can add texture. I can add colour. What I want to do is just to see that orange isn't a very moving colour. It's not giving me the orange colour I'm looking for. So I will show you a couple of techniques to work with that. One thing I'm not doing is I'm not dipping my pencil into the water. If you dip it in like that, that's okay, but what you're starting to do is you're starting to get water into the wood and it will start to disintegrate. It's not a good idea. There are plenty of ways you can use the pigment from the pencil, but dipping it into the water isn't the best way. Okay, so quite loosely at the moment, I will start to bring out some detail. I'm a little disappointed the way that orange has not moved as well as I wanted it to, but that's easily solved. So that's moved. Let's go into this trumpet. Okay, so you can see how this orange is not blending as well as I'd like it to, but maybe I need a different brush. Maybe it's slightly stiffer, but that's working now. Maybe I didn't have enough pigment on, so I need to. So all I'm doing is just putting the colour down for now. Let's put some greens down. There's a little bit here, but I can see there's some yellow. Normally I hold all the pencils in my hand. So the stems of these are quite dark. Take them off the page. If I wanted to, I could just mix it between the watercolour consistency and the pencil. Let's try adding a little bit of different tones on there. And again, you'll see it looks really scruffy at first, but the more you work into it, and I think this is how people get frustrated with what they're doing, because it doesn't look finished. Well, maybe you just need a couple more stages, but sometimes it's the difference between overworking and being able to step back. But that's all through practice. That's all through, trying things over and over again. Okay, let's separate those. I know it's going to lighten, so I'm not overly worried. I'm missing some shapes there. These may not be on the picture, but I can see it's just missing something. And this is where, though I know what the picture looks like, nobody else does, so they can't see. For me, it needs something here. Okay, so let's add some water and see how they work. Okay, so this greens are still holding the texture of the paper, which I like. And you can see I'm actually shaping a little bit more and bringing out the shapes of the leaves, moving over the areas I've coloured. So still quite a simple base layer at the moment. But you can imagine this out at, it's easy to travel with. You've not got wet paint, but you've got that effect that you can use. Okay. I'm just all I'm doing is moving the pigment around. And it's sharpening the edges. So I've got a bit of colour on my brush. When I think about it, I'm just going to add. The outer leaves are a little bit green. I've got some green in them.
Daffodils.
Yeah, petals, that's it. So as I've got some green on my brush, I'm just starting to bring it in. So like I say, I'm moving pigment around. And I'm going to try something I haven't done before, but I'm sure it will work. Well, we'll see. I want to create textures in the background. So again, if it's not strong enough, I can go back in. And I'm just spreading some of this green around. If I wanted to, I could really control and soften and make it look more realistic. But I'm all for creating texture, letting the material do the job for you. I think that's lost some of that edge. So at the moment, you know, it looks quite loose, a bit, no real detail yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry and then work back into it and maybe move and manipulate areas which I feel I need to work on. So if we take a short break, and I'll see you in a few moments and we'll carry on working on this piece.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing of being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
Hello and welcome back. So I've had time to look and review, and now I think I'm going to start to bring out some of the darker values, because that will help me see what I need to do. So the darker values are going to be inside the flower, and I don't know, but I might just leave the pencil feel and use the wash as a background. These are all parts of being able to use watercolour pencils. So it's here, under here is a lot darker. And you can see even by starting to put that colour on, how it's darkened and shown that this area is inside. I'm using a technique which you would see in coloured pencils, just to soften, move around. And I quite like the feel. So now I can sharpen, I can feel, I can adjust. So first stage was putting the wet on, and now I can use these as a pencil. Okay, I think I need to put some more orange on there because it's gone a little brown. So you can see by just thinking about manipulating the colours, how you can blend and work with the colours. That's better. So at first it looked quite rough, but now you can start to work on and bring out and sharpen your detail. area of shadow there. Okay. So working into these petals, because where they hit the base, they are a little darker. Again, thinking about the shapes that they make. Quite like this pencil feel, so I'm not going to add any more water at the moment. Just bringing out more depth and a little more shape. So I don't know if you can see, but from that very loose start, the shape is now starting to sharpen. I'm making sure that the petals are touching the middle areas, because you do tend to lose these a little bit because you're trying to work loosely. So I think I need a bit of green, because this will just help tie in with the stems. Okay, not too much. I think it works without overdoing it, but they do have a touch of green in them. Okay, so maybe I'm just going to soften and finish this a little bit. Don't want to lose the texture I've got, but I do want to bring out a little bit more of the softness of the leaves. Petals, sorry. Okay. So that's the one that's in front, and again, I don't think it's dark enough, not inside. So let's add a much darker tone. There you go. Still a bit wet, but that has definitely added some tones, better tones to it. So normally I only work with a few colours, but you do need, with pencils, some more colours. Looking at the tone there. And maybe the problem is I haven't brought this right up to the edge, so it's looking a little odd. Okay. I will overwork that, so what I'm going to do is just quickly move on to these other flowers, and I don't want them as detailed because they're pushing back into the background, and I quite like this softness here. This needs to be worked on because it's behind, so I'm going to make sure I push this back. Some green. Just constantly thinking about what's in shadow and what's not. I don't think that was strong enough, so I'm just bringing out the blue. While I've got it, I'm just going to define these leaves this time. Just sharpen these as well, because they are quite sharp and they're quite obvious. As much as I want to see texture, I do sometimes feel you do need to actually define and show what you're trying to achieve. So by adding the blue, it's definitely, I might add it into here. Let's see if I can shade that. And often, again, using all colours all over tends to bring it all together. So I think that these are quite dark stems, and I think this blue on top of the wash I've got is making a really, see there how that's starting to bring out, and you can see the detail coming out a little bit more. And you're using a blue, it's not a green, Just using blue because of the colour you've already got down. Not sure. Some areas I'm going to leave quite loose because I think it just adds different textures. What you do need to think about is definitely making sure you've got a stem for this and a stem for every other flower you can see, because it will not add to the story of the piece if you kind of got a flower floating without a stem. I think that's really added, that's what it was missing, this darker tone. So using it as a pencil, it is a pencil. You can use it lots of different ways to create lots of techniques. Okay, so I'm much happier with that. And I wasn't using green, I was using the blue. Just finish off some of these areas. Need a green, because definitely want to bring out some of the green in these petals. If it's too harsh, which I feel it is a little bit, I can go back in with my brush and soften. This is why I love these pencils, because you've got so many options with them. There you go. Let's take that down a notch. What I do feel I'm missing is that depth again. So let's bring out some ochres. Start to bring out and just define the different areas of the flower. So these have folds, and they're much orange, have much more orange in them, but sometimes orange isn't the colour you need to use. Could be, like I'm using here, burnt ochre, because with the colour underneath, it's working alongside and making new colours. I want to define and show that there is a different flower behind. And here, again, work on the inside. And tone and highlight without losing too much of the yellow. Shape. Okay. You can see a bit of mist, which is up here. I often hold my pencils like this, because if I put them on the table, they will roll off. So, go back in my water. That's too big. See how that moves. I can create that bud in the background. Let's see. Oh, that's nice. Just adding a bit of water there. It's just strengthened that colour. So I can keep working on this. I mean, quite like it as it is, it's quite loose, but I want to try some more effects. And I won't have time if I continue working on it. But you can see how they work. You can keep manipulating. You can do it as soft as you want, or you can start to bring in colour and make it harder. What I want to do is I want to show you what you can also do with the watercolour pencil. So I'm just going to take off some of the pencil, the wood around it, because I want the pigment. Like I said before, I don't want to dip my pencil into my water. That will start to rot the wood, and then you're left with a pencil that starts to deteriorate and crumble. So one way of getting colour is to use the end of the brush, and you just take it off here, and then you can add it on So you get a really big, strong amount of colour, because it's colour straight onto the page rather than the pigment onto the page and it's attached itself to the paper. So that's one way. Or I'm going to try this. I haven't tried it before, but I have seen others. I'm just going to wet around, and then I'm going to shave pigment onto it. So kind of like a wet in wet technique. Because the beautiful thing about these watercolour pencils is they're actually quite, you have to push the pigment around the page. So I know that just dropping water onto it isn't really going to affect it as much as it can do with other wet mediums, because I've had to push it around the page. So let's wet this. How it's going to work, I don't know. I want some texture over here. So what I'm doing is just using materials I've got. And you can see I can go over the areas I've done with the pencil, and it doesn't move overly readily into the background. Oops. Okay, it's drying quite quickly. It must be warm in the studio.
It's spring now, it's warmer.
It's spring and warm. Okay, well, let's see if it works. I'm not worried. This is all part of seeing what happens and seeing what doesn't. What I want to do is just make sure that effects happen between the stems, then I'm not just looking at something in the foreground. Let's try this. So using my knife, I'm just going to scrape pigment onto the wet page, not worrying about it going into the flower. I think that's just part of it. Just making sure I'm getting pigment, not... Oh, that's working fun. Might put more colours on there. Let me try a bit of greens. So just take the wood off and expose a bit more of the colour below, and then just add some different colour. And what I could do is use a spray bottle and really enhance some of these effects. Some more water. So let's see what happens. I just add water. Obviously, some colours work a little bit better than others. Green's not as effective. Don't think I've got a spray bottle, but that's what I would have tried. That's lovely. That's fun. Just make sure, manipulate, and it's as a whole instead of just an outline. So this is all about creating texture, seeing what your materials will do. I want a little bit more blue back in the middle here, because I like those effects. And I might take some over the leaves at the bottom. I want to see into the... So, just seeing how the pigment works on the wet. I think what I'm going to have to do is just let it work, because you can see how it needs to just attach itself, and it's quite soft. I was expecting a little bit stronger because I've used other materials and it's not quite as strong as that. It's subtle, but I'm quite pleased with that effect. It's quite nice. Just finishing off and making sure that there's no halos. That is one thing which I think helps finish a piece. It's just making sure these last stages that the background and everything has worked together, so there's no halos or gaps. I think that just starts to make sure everything fits together. Taking some of the pigment off the page and putting it behind there. go. I think that works quite well. So what I'm trying to do is just show you how versatile these lovely pencils are. So have a go, try on different papers, take them out. They're great for taking out sketching. So join me soon for another live demonstration.